I am here today with the making of one of my mixed media collage pieces that started with a paint pour and then went on from there. So I have used a dirty pour where you put the layers of different colored paint in the cup, and I'm not as concerned about making a excellent pour as I am in just getting a background, a piece started. It's a bit like a elaborate underpainting, if you will, that I'm going to be collaging and perhaps painting on top of. So I have in mind that I would like this to end up being a seascape. I've done some before that I was actually happy with, so I'm kind of trying to get the same bit of effect with this one. So I have colorful sky up above with some pinks and oranges and whites and of course blues in it. And then now I'm trying to make like the bottom third be more of a water scene, and I love the turbulence that this poured paint can give to the water. So that's what I'm kind of working with there. And then I know that I want a bit of rocks, like rocky shore along the horizon line, just to kind of establish that. So I'm using some like burnt sienna and colors like that in my rock areas. So that's what I'm doing next. I think it can be a great foundation for the rocks along a coastline. You see them all weathered in different ways, and they are sometimes kind of colorful in themselves, and so that's kind of the look I was after there. I'm manipulating this water part a little bit, breaking up some of those purple cells so they're not quite so dominant. I'm adding in some colors here, using a palette knife to kind of blend things together a little bit while it's all still very wet. Now, several days later, once it's good and dry, I am getting ready to do the collage portion of the piece. And so I've gathered some papers to pick from. I like to kind of do a pre-selection so that I have a little bit smaller palette of papers accessible. So I have colors that are for that shoreline. I have colors for the sky. I have whites and I have blues of different intensity. And I even have a little bit of pinks. So I choose a variety of types of papers. I don't know for sure what all I'll want to pick. I've got like architectural detail here on this piece. I've got like mulberry papers. I've got my favorite paper shop to order from is Mulberry Paper and More, and I'll put a link to them down below. But I really also like what I call found papers, and so those might be security envelopes or scraps of painted paper from palettes, that I use. This is a Kleenex box. I like the design, so I kept sections of that. So just a whole variety. It might be from magazine pages. There's just bits and pieces from other projects. All kinds of different things are fair game for collaging. And then I did pick some darks. I'm not sure if I'm going to use these yet, but I have them here handy. I don't like to have to stop in the middle of working on something to go hunt down more paper, so I try to have as much handy as possible. The first thing I'm playing with here is, do I want some sort of structure, kind of like the feel of a lighthouse or something like that on this rock? And I'm undecided. I'm just going to leave it sit there for a bit and just think about it, see how it feels. But I'm going to wait to stick that down because I want to wait until I get some more collage in the sky and everything before I make that kind of decision. I am tearing some paper to put in these rocks to kind of accentuate what I want to in those. And then I'm using matte gel medium. I prefer by the Liquitex brand to get those all stuck down. I'm also using a silicone brush, which is my favorite tool to use with the matte gel medium. From here, it's just a matter of picking which papers are going to best communicate what I want to. So I'm adding some highlights and shadows using my paper. I'm checking out the lighthouse idea again. So I'm choosing papers that have enough pattern to be interesting without it being super definable in these little chunks. So this paper was actually the image of a brick wall, but you can't tell that by the time I have used these tiny little bits on my landscape. I'm also using the little swirly colored pattern that I'm sticking down now is actually fabric, a little scrap of fabric, and that swirly design on it really made me think about, you know, the motion of the waves and water and everything. So even though it's going on the rocks, I think it helps communicate that feeling. I'm using scissors to cut the fabrics because they do not tear well, but I, on the papers, try to tear it as much as possible rather than cut, because I just think that especially for a landscape, it just makes a more organic looking piece. So that's what I usually do whenever possible. I'm pulling out a little bit of paint here too, and this is a flat acrylic paint, and I'm just using it to just do a little bit of touching up in areas. I am not opposed to using paint. The whole background is made of paint, but I do try to keep the painting to a minimum at this stage of the game and rely more on collage. I am defining some of those shadow areas, and they may get collaged over, but it just helps me visualize what needs to be happening here on these rocky areas. This is a scene made up from my imagination. There's no reference photo, so it does kind of help me to stop and think about where I'm headed once in a while. I'm lifting it up so I can, take a look back a bit at it instead of looking straight down on it. I'm not much of an easel worker, but I do see how an easel can be handy from time to time. Now I'm ready to begin collaging in the sky, and obviously this piece is mostly sky, so that will be the biggest part of my work to do is the sky. I had this scribbles of pink on the white paper, which I kind of want to bring in or emphasize some of that pink that's already there and kind of go with that. I like the painting to lead me as much as possible, but then I also want to kind of make it be what I want it to be also. So I kind of feel like it's this partnership as I work on a piece where I respond to the piece, and hopefully the piece is, submitting to me as I try to come to an agreement with it. I feel like sometimes they're just kind of making some compromises on how things go as we work along. So again, I don't have a reference photo or anything. I'm just wanting, I know the feeling I want. This is a submission for a show at a gallery that's water themed, and my concept is that we think of the sea and the ocean, or things like that are obviously water, but that there's so much in the water in the sky as well, and that's kind of the feeling I want to communicate in this. That we have all that sky that's also a source of water, and so that's a little bit the feel I'm after, but I'm still kind of playing around to see how much I can accomplish that. I do know that the sky's a little bit wilder than I care for it to be. I don't want these bands going clear across the sky quite like they do. I want to use them, but I also want to make them a little bit more natural looking, I guess. And so that's kind of my goal, and we'll see how well I do getting there. Another challenge in this is that I have these beautiful sails that you'd like to see in a poured painting, and I do want to keep some of those here and there just to have that history of the piece, like its full history showing. However, I also don't want that to dictate how I make the piece. Like, I don't want it to be about the beautiful sails. I want it to be a beautiful sky. So that's my challenge there as I move forward with that. At this point, it's just a lot of little bits and pieces and pasting them down and readjusting and so on through the piece. I'm using some security envelope, and I'm using some of this paper that's been colored on, and I'm using some map page bits here. Just a whole variety of things. I think the more variety of types of papers, the richer the end result will be. I do lots of layering, so each strip that I put down may get covered up by a future strip, but I'm okay with that. I think it just all builds texture, and it's more similar to the process of painting, where you put a dab of paint down and then another dab and so on, but I am putting down dabs or strokes of paper instead. This paper that is, I'm not sure what it's called, but it has strands in it, so that when you tear it, it's got all these dangly strands. I kind of hit on that as a good way to communicate that water in the sky, like that maybe there's actually some rain coming down that you can see, like those tendrils might be actually some rainy areas, or an implication of that. So I'm kind of going with that. I want to develop areas that are more clumps of clouds and a little less these ribbons of orange. I like that color in there. I want to preserve the color, but I want to make the shape a little bit more natural, I guess. Also, I'm pretty happy with my sea, and I'm not going to do any collaging yet. I'm going to leave it remaining as a pour. But I don't want the sky to be so busy that it detracts from the sea. I want them to be in balance with each other. I want this piece to somehow show the turbulence of the sea, and even some turbulence in the sky, but yet overall be kind of a serene feeling piece. Kind of how water in real life mesmerizes us and also calms us. So I would love it if I could pull off something that did that. As I work, my little pieces tend to get smaller as I fine-tune what's happening. I'm using that strandy paper to tone down, but you can still see the color back behind, but it kind of tones it down, and it does give the effect of wispy clouds, I think. So I found it very handy. I also use some white tissue paper just to kind of mute a color a little bit by pasting it over an area. It becomes somewhat transparent, but is still opaque enough to give a tinge of white to wherever I'm gluing it. I also use some paper doilies, and it gives just a little unexpected pattern and design. I love it when those things are not obvious, but then you start looking close and then you can recognize that, oh, that's an envelope, or that's a map, or that's a paper doily. I really like those little aha moments that it gives people that really take the time to look. I'm not worrying about the edges a whole lot as I work, because I do know I made sure when I did the pour that the sides were covered, so I know that we have this poured edge all around the sides. So I do wrap around some of the collage, but I'm really not concerned about giving a lot of attention at this point to the edges, because I feel like that's already been kind of taken care of during the pour. So now it's just down to adding the last little bits and pieces of finishing touches, getting things where I want them to be. And here is my finished piece in detail. So I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I'll see you next time.